We have a lot of headlines to get to, but we do begin with breaking news as it relates to Middle East conflict. I want you to take a good look at your screen as the Associated Press is providing us a live look out in central Damascus, Syria on this Monday. The Associated Press reporting a UK-based war monitor says Israeli airstrikes this Monday hit missile warehouses in Syria and called it, quote, the most violent strikes since 2012, end quote. The Associated Press goes on to say Israel has been pounding what it says are military sites in Syria after the dramatic collapse of President Bashar Assad's rule, wiping out air defenses and most of the arsenal of the former Syrian army. Israeli troops have also seized a border buffer zone, sparking condemnation with critics, accusing Israel of violating the 1974 ceasefire and possibly exploiting the chaos in Syria for land grab. A lot to dissect on this Monday, so we want to bring into the conversation Middle East correspondent near Damascus, Josh Haston. Josh, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to begin with the very latest as it relates to these airstrikes. We've been looking at the fall of the Assad regime, and we see that Israeli Defense Forces are not letting up as it relates to the back and forth between what could be potential military grabs as it relates to different warehouses where their artillery is held. Can you set the stage for this, please?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, the Assad regime collapsed about a week ago or so, and now you have all of these groups vying for control there in Syria. And it's very important to Israel that these groups, a lot of them identified actually as terrorists by the U.S. administration, by the U.S. government, don't get their hands on some of these Assad weapons. You're talking about chemical weapons, you're talking about surface-to-surface missiles. These weapons can do major damage against the Israeli population centers. So Israel has established a buffer zone, in addition to the airstrikes, have established a buffer zone in the northern part of the Golan on the Syrian side in order to monitor the situation, simultaneously targeting those weapons facilities, targeting the air defense systems of Syria. At the end of the day, we don't know what the situation will bring. We don't know who's going to ultimately take control, and Israel has to prepare for every scenario to make sure that these terrorist groups do not turn on the state of Israel. Yes, Bashar Assad was a horrible, tyrannical dictator who ruled for over 50 years, 54 years there in Syria. He gassed his own people with chemical weapons. So on one hand, it's good that he's gone. On the other hand, we do not know for sure who's going to maintain that vacuum that is now a reality as a result of the rebel attacks and the takeover there. Israel has to be prepared that none of this spills over into our country.
Yeah, and that seems to be the concern of many this morning with the unknown of who will take the reign. There is concern that maybe Iran would step up and try to back Syria on this front in that fight against Israel, further adding to what you were saying about the concerns for weapons and artillery, as there is concern about nuclear capabilities as it relates to Iran.
Yeah, well, Iran is still the biggest threat to all of humanity. They're still striving for nuclear weapons. They certainly have been weakened as a result of, number one, Israel taking out Hezbollah, also the weakening of Hamas, and the fall of Syria, really. I mean, this is Iran and Syria, along with Russian backing. They were all in the same orbit. And on the other side, you have groups that are more Sunni Muslims, and you're talking about the HTS and the Turkish-backed groups. So they're on opposing sides, and Iran has already reached out to those rebels saying, we don't want any problems with you. We don't want to cause, we don't want this to expand in terms of conflict between those two entities. So Israel has to watch out both for Iran and the tentacles of Iran, which include Hezbollah, which is still trying to rearm itself, even though we have a ceasefire with them now, Hamas, which is still popping their heads out in Gaza. And on the other side, you have these groups who are saying openly, there was a video recorded the other day that said, one of these group leaders said, we want to march to Jerusalem. So we take those things very seriously here in the state of Israel when somebody issues a threat like that. And these are groups that are applauded by Hamas. Hamas is happy what happened in Syria. There's a big divide there between the Sunni terrorist organizations and the Shia terrorist organizations, but where they come together, where they're able to meet, is their goal to destroy the state of Israel. So on that, they certainly agree on. So Israel has taken the necessary precautions on the instability in Syria right now, we have to make sure that they don't turn their guns towards us.
Josh, as we further discuss this conflict, the Associated Press reporting on this Monday that Israeli troops have seized a, quote, border buffer zone. There was a lot of confusion as it relates to what this border buffer zone is. People wondering if this relates to the Israeli occupied Golan Heights area.
So we're talking about a 155 square mile zone, which is actually in the Syrian Golan Heights. You have the Israeli side of the Golan Heights and you have the Syrian. So the first time since 1974, you now have Israeli troops perched on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights for one reason only, to make sure that Israel isn't attacked. This is not any type of land grab. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it clear time and time again. He just made it clear in a conversation with President-elect Trump over the weekend. Israel has no intention of any type of land grab or remaining in Syria. But that being said, we cannot take risks with our security. That is a strategic vantage point. Whoever controls that mountaintop sees the entire region. So we cannot have any of these groups potentially getting their hands on weapons, number one. Number two, having a presence on the Syrian side of the Golan and shooting into Israel. Ironically, you actually had videos over the last several days of Druze groups, a Druze minority group in Syria, saying that they would hope, they would rather that Israel take control over that area. They would rather live under Israel than risk the chance that any of these potential rebel groups would come and make their lives miserable, perhaps take them as prisoners, their wives, their daughters. We've seen this before in the Middle East with the Yazidis I'm thinking about. So these Druze actually said, and they're Druze minorities in northern Israel and the Golan Heights as well, who are citizens, proud citizens of the state of Israel, most of them. So now you have this group in Syria saying they would rather live under Israel. That being said, Israel has made it clear, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that time and time again, that we have no desire of expanding into that area, maintaining a permanent presence. Israel must be there in order to protect our northern border as a result of the realities of the situation.
Josh, I'm glad you mentioned that land grab aspect because critics saying this morning that they think it was a land grab. They're also saying that this border buffer zone violates a 1974 ceasefire agreement that was already in place. Could you provide this perspective? Because obviously we've seen how the International Criminal Court has kind of come at Israel several times, including Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for Israel's response. But critics in Israel on the other side of the argument saying, OK, well, we would love to see the ICC come at these terroristic organizations as they are Israel.
Yeah, it's an absolute double standard, going after the prime minister of a democratically elected country, but yet, where are they when it comes to Hamas? And again, the purpose of being in that area up there on the border is not to take any land. Those Israel haters out there go and accuse Israel of carrying out some sort of land grab. Those are just essentially, these individuals are serving basically as the legal, if you will, arm or branch of the terrorists. That's what they're accusing Israel of doing. Israel has no intention to remain there. Israel is there purely for security reasons. Any country which is facing the threats that Israel's facing, namely a war on 7 different fronts right now, and if you include Syria, potential threat in Syria, that's 8 different fronts. Any other country would do everything in its power to take the strategic highlands and prevent a potential enemy entity from the ability to overlook the entire population on its northern borders. So these are just, honestly, these are Israel haters. These are so-called human rights organizations holding Israel to a different standard. They don't have the same standard for any other country in the world. Israel's acting in self-defense, as we've had to do since our existence back in 1948. So, it's expected, unfortunately. You see condemnations of Israel in the United Nations more than any other country in the world combined. You see it time and time again each and every year, whether it's the General Assembly or Security Council or the Human Rights branch of the UN in Geneva. You see it time and time again, Israel held to a different standard. We're used to it. It's unfortunate, but we are going to do whatever is necessary to prevent any of these potential enemies from seizing strategic lands and causing a potential threat to the state of Israel.
Josh Haston, always a pleasure to have you on the show. We appreciate your candid dialogue and your perspective of all things Middle East. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great and safe rest of your day.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you.